Okay, so this is your instruction for dealing with apostrophes, and I've got to say I've got a good trick for this. This gives the people a lot of trouble. I always see apostrophe errors. It is a very rare student who knows how to use apostrophes correctly. And so either you haven't been given instruction or you've been given spotty instruction. I'm not sure what has happened, but somehow this has not gotten through to a lot of people. So I want to point out the pages in your handbook. Of course, those are great. Section 19 in your handbook for that. There are obscure rules in there like handling joint possession, Freds and Marges, opinions, things like that. So there are a lot of things. Plural numbers, how do you do that? Plural letters, the plural of words mentioned as words. I mean, all these different things. But for just regular uses of the apostrophe to show possession, not for contractions, I figure you know contractions. If you don't, please learn them, okay? But I do not feel compelled to give you instruction on those. But this, I do have kind of a trick for doing apostrophes, because there are several steps to determine where you put the apostrophe if you do it the traditional way. If you don't do it the traditional way, it's much simpler. And so just follow me here, and I'm going to show you how to do that. First off, I've got a lot of little phrases here, and at the end I've got even a few sentences that most of them need apostrophes. And so what we're going to do is we're not going to start with the word that gets the apostrophe. We're going to start with the word that is owned or possessed, or it's a part of something before it. So we're going to start with books. And what you do is you find the thing that's owned or the thing that's possessed, if you want to use that word, and then you say, well, who or what owns it? Who or what, does this belong to? And the books belong to children. They do not belong to children's, okay? And so the end of your answer, who does it belong to? That is where you put the apostrophe every time, okay? Now this is on nouns that get an apostrophe. Pronouns like his, my, yours, hers, those never get apostrophes, okay? But on regular nouns that get apostrophes, there is no exception to this, okay? So it makes it simpler. And so your apostrophe on children's is not going to go after the S. It's going to go right here before the S. Children's books, okay? Because the books belong to children. They do not belong to children's. All right, let's look at another one. That man's books. Here again, the books belong to that man. They don't belong to that man's. They belong to that man. And here again, the apostrophe goes before the S. Now, does it ever go after the S? Of course it does, but not so far. Now, I want to point out something. This one is plural, and it went before the S. This one is singular, and it went before the S. You cannot say, hey, is it plural, is it singular, and figure that alone will tell you where the apostrophe goes. There are other steps, and that's why I'm saying go this way instead. All right? In English, we don't always make things plural with an S. Sometimes we use other things, so that is why that will not work in every case and may really mess you up. So we've got two done, children's books, man's books. All right, now let's do covers, the covers of those books. Guess what? The end of my answer is here. It's not the covers of those books, it's the covers of those books. So my apostrophe goes right there. Let's look at another one, that book's covers. Here are the covers that belong to that book, and so of course it'd go before the S. Let's do some more. People's opinions. These are the opinions belonging to people, not people's, and so we're going to put it here before the S. A person's opinions. These are the opinions of a person, not a person's, a person, and so it's going to go again before the S. Here's one that people all the time get wrong. I see it on house signs all the time. And this is when you've got the in front of a last name. Okay, the Jefferson's apartment. So let's just use the rule I taught you. Okay, the apartment belongs to, would you say it belongs to the Jefferson? Or would you say it belongs to the Jeffersons? Of course you'd say it belongs to the Jeffersons, and you put it after the S. And here's something to remember. We never use the in front of one person's last name. Okay, if George Jefferson lives there alone, you wouldn't say, oh, the Jefferson lives there. We just don't do it. We do it with family groups. And so that's why you would have the apostrophe after the S. And look, the grammar check really didn't like that either. Just goes to show it's wrong a lot of the time. Don't rely on grammar check to tell you. Here's another situation. My boss's car was vandalized. Not my boss car, okay, but my boss's car. So this is the car that belongs to my boss. Now, notice how I've already got two S's here. So this may seem, oh, well, what do I do? You just put an apostrophe, and because you're adding an extra syllable, you're not saying my boss car was vandalized. You're saying my boss's car was vandalized. I'm adding that extra sound. I add an extra S, and that's how it goes. Okay. Notice if bosses is plural, that would be different. Again, the car that belongs to my boss, or in this case, the cars that belong to several of the bosses. It's several of the bosses, so guess what? It's going to go right here at the end. And lastly, let's look at this one. All of the bosses went out for dinner. Now, I want to point this out. A lot of times when you start putting apostrophes on things, suddenly everything that ends in S looks like it needs an apostrophe. But you've got to be sure that it actually owns what immediately follows it. And the bosses do not own went out. So this gets no apostrophe. But just keep that in mind. So to sum up this method, first determine if it does in fact own what's follows. If it doesn't, don't use an apostrophe, okay, to show possession. Then determine what is possessed. Is, the car here is owned, so the car is possessed. That's what I determine. And then finally, answer the question, who or what owns this? The car, my boss owns it. And so that is where you put the apostrophe. Well, I hope this has been helpful for you. Feel free to play it again and pause it if you want to read things more slowly. But I really hope that this helps you with those tricky apostrophes.